The battle was over, and an unsettling silence lingered in the air. The once mighty warrior king lay defeated in the dust, his armor shattered, his empire in ruins. He had fought bravely, commanding a multi-species force that had once inspired respect across galaxies. But in the end, it wasn't his enemy's strength that felled him. It was betrayal. With each labored breath, his injuries gnawed at him, and he scanned the battlefield for any allies. There were none. Painfully, he realized the truth. His most trusted commanders had abandoned him, and the alien species that had once sworn loyalty to his cause had left him to die. He had devoted everything to uniting them under a single banner, yet they discarded him the moment he became a liability. He struggled to rise, but his once powerful body refused. His allies' ships became fading specks on the horizon, their retreat a clear statement that his era had ended. His injuries rendered him weak, and in an empire defined by strength, weakness had no place. Anger burned brighter than his wounds as he processed their betrayal. He had bled for them, led them to countless victories, crushed their enemies, and now they had abandoned him on a desolate planet to die alone. As he lay helpless on the scorched ground, he clenched his fists, refusing to surrender to the inevitable. He wasn't one to give up easily. He had always fought against impossible odds, and this time would be no different, even if it meant crawling for miles. As hours turned to days, his mind drifted to the species that had left him behind, recalling their ruthless logic and pragmatism. To them, loyalty was weakness, an unworthy trait in a world governed by strength and survival. They saw no value in sentiment. Despite the pain, he clung to the faint hope of survival, refusing to let go. Yet his empire was gone. His allies had forsaken him, and he lay dying on a planet where no one could find him. At least, that's what he thought. Then, faint voices broke through the silence. Humans? He barely comprehended it, his mind clouded with confusion. What were humans doing here on this barren wasteland? His pride surged with indignation as he realized he'd been found in such a vulnerable state by the very species he had once mocked as weak and soft. Humans were too emotional, too compassionate, attributes he had long deemed useless. Yet here they were discussing how to help him. He tried to snarl, to demand they leave him be, but his body betrayed him, managing only a weak whisper. Surprisingly, the humans did not mock him. They kneeled beside him, their medical equipment humming as they tended to his wounds with gentle concern. He hated it. This wasn't the dignified end he had imagined. But despite his pride and desire to face death on his terms, the humans refused to let him die. Time blurred as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Each awakening met with their quiet, relentless care. They gave him water and nourishment and repaired his broken body as best as they could. Their resources were limited, their tools primitive by his empire's standards, yet their persistence was unyielding. He couldn't understand why they would waste time and effort on him, a stranger who had never shown them kindness or respect. They asked for nothing in return, no allegiance, no promise of loyalty. This infuriated him even more. He had always understood relationships as transactions. Alliances were built on power, control, or fear. But these humans helped him simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. He watched them, baffled, as they went about their tasks, laughing and sharing stories. Their bonds were clear, not held together by fear or control, but by something deeper, trust and loyalty. Concepts he had discarded as naive now seemed powerful in their simplicity. One of the humans, their leader, approached him with quiet respect, asking only a few questions and giving him space to heal. She didn't see him as a relic of a fallen empire. To her, he was simply a life worth saving. The thought unsettled him. As his body began to recover, he resented them even more, for they denied him the release of death. He owed them now, a debt he hadn't asked for. Reluctantly, he began to observe them more closely. Despite lacking the advanced technology his empire had, they adapted to their harsh surroundings with resourcefulness and creativity. Their strength wasn't in brute force or superior weaponry. It was a quiet resilience, an indomitable will to survive. He started to respect it, even if he didn't fully understand it. The humans, for their part, gave him the space he needed to process his situation, letting him heal at his own pace. Slowly, he found himself lowering his guard, allowing himself to trust them in a way he had never trusted anyone before. It was foreign to him, a leader who had ruled through fear and power, now witnessing loyalty, not born of coercion, but of genuine care. These humans had shown him more loyalty in his weakened state than any of his former allies ever had. As he regained his strength, he contemplated his next steps. His empire might be gone, his former allies scattered, but he wasn't finished yet. He hadn't anticipated that, even in his weakest moment, he would learn something valuable from those he had once scorned. Humans may lack physical might, but they possessed a tenacity that even he could not deny. Power, he realized, wasn't only about control or fear. Sometimes, strength came from resilience, from an unbreakable bond to those one trusted. For the first time in his life, the warrior king wondered if he had underestimated humanity. As the days passed, his respect for them grew. They had offered him a new perspective on power, one that did not rely on dominance or brute force, but on unity, loyalty, and compassion. Even in the smallest tasks, their camaraderie was something the king had never fully understood in his time as a ruler. In the quiet moments between his recovery, the humans shared stories of their own struggles, the battles they had fought, the hardships they had endured. They spoke of Earth, their home, a planet ravaged by wars, disasters, and challenges they had overcome with sheer determination. It was unlike anything the warrior king had ever heard from any of the alien races he had commanded. The stories were raw, filled with loss, yet brimming with hope. It dawned on him that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or numbers, but in their ability to endure the unimaginable for the first time. He listened truly to their tales. They weren't conquerors by nature, but survivors, and in that there was a power far greater than the brute force he had always valued. These humans didn't fight for dominance. They fought for each other, for survival, for a future, and that he realized was something his empire had never understood as he watched them. The warrior king felt something unfamiliar stirring within him: respect. These were not the weak creatures he had dismissed in the past. Their strength was quiet, but it was their every action. They took every word. They spoke carried a weight of resolve that was foreign to the cold calculations of the alien races he had once allied with. The humans were different. They were driven by something deeper, something that didn't rely on fear or control. He found himself reflecting on his own rules from his past. The alliances he had built were based on power and fear. His empire thrived because he was stronger than those around him, and those who followed him did so out of necessity, not loyalty. The moment he showed weakness, they had abandoned him, but these humans stayed not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It was a concept that rattled him. For so long, he had viewed loyalty as something to be commanded, to be demanded, but here with these humans, loyalty was enforced. It was earned, and in their actions he saw a glimpse of something he had never thought possible: trust without conditions. He didn't speak of these thoughts. Of course, not yet. His pride still held him back, though it was no longer the iron grip. It once was the humans, to their credit, never pushed. They seemed to understand that his silence wasn't hostility anymore, but reflection. They gave him the space to reconcile his old beliefs with this new reality. One evening, as the sun set on the barren planet, the human leader approached him again. She didn't ask him questions. Instead, she sat beside him, looking out over the horizon after a few moments of silence. She spoke not about him, but about their mission, their people. She told him how humanity had been overlooked by the greater galactic powers, how they had been seen as insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But instead of letting that break them, it had fueled their desire to prove themselves. They didn't seek to dominate, to conquer, like so many other races. They sought respect, a place in the galaxy where they could be recognized. For their resilience. The warrior king felt a pang of recognition. He had once felt that same drive, that same desire to prove his worth in a galaxy that had doubted him. He had fought for power, for dominance, to show that he was stronger than anyone else. But these humans weren't fighting for power. They were fighting for something far more profound: dignity. A place where they could belong without having to crush others to get there. It was a revelation that shook him to his core. He spoke then, for the first time in what felt like ages, his voice, hueso and used, but it carried the weight of someone who had spent too long in silence. He asked the human leader why they had saved him, why they had gone out of their way to help someone who had nothing to offer them, someone who had once dismissed their entire race as beneath him. Her answer was simple: because it was the right thing to do. Those words echoed in his mind long after the conversation ended. In all his years of ruling, in all the battles he had fought, and the empires he had built, he had never considered such an idea. Doing something not for power, not for gain, but simply because it was right was a concept that had no place in the brutal politics of his empire. Yet here with these humans, it was their guiding principle. The warrior king's thoughts turned inward. He had always believed that strength was the only currency that mattered his empire had, because he was the strongest and the most ruthless. But now, as he sat among these humans, he began to question that belief was strength. Truly, the only way to lead was power, which was really worth more than loyalty, than trust, than doing what was right. It was a question he had never asked himself before, and now it wouldn't leave him the more time he spent with the humans. The more he began to see the value in their way of thinking. They didn't need to rule through fear or force. They ruled through unity, through a bond that was deeper than any alliance he had ever forged. They didn't abandon their own when things got tough. They stood by each other, not out of obligation, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. For the first time in his life, the warrior king understood what it meant to truly lead. It wasn't about commanding armies or conquering planets. It was about earning the trust and loyalty of those around you, about being the kind of leader that people followed, not out of fear, but out of respect, and that more than anything was the lesson these humans had taught him. The moment of decision came faster than he expected. His body, though still scarred from battle, had regained its strength. But it wasn't just his physical recovery that was complete. Something inside him had shifted. He could no longer ignore the truth that had been creeping into his mind during his time with the human power. In the way he had always understood, it wasn't enough. Not anymore as the humans prepared to leave the planet. Their mission complete, the warrior king made a choice. He never thought he'd make it. He asked them to stay, not because he needed them to save him. He was far beyond that. No, this time he wanted them to stand with him, not as rescuers, but as equals. He laid out his plan. His empire, though fractured and scattered, was not yet dead. There were still those who would follow him, who believed in his leadership. But it wouldn't be easy. His former allies, the ones who had betrayed him, had taken control of key territories, claiming them as their own. In his absence, they believed him to be dead or too broken to return. He intended to prove them wrong. The humans, to his surprise, didn't hesitate. They didn't question his motives or ask for assurances. They simply agreed. It was a testament to their character, their unwavering commitment to those they trusted. And though he still found it difficult to admit out loud, the warrior king had come to trust them. He knew now that their loyalty wasn't born from fear or obligation, but from something far more powerful. That loyalty was a force he could no longer deny, nor could he afford to lose with the humans. At his side, the king set his plan into motion. Their small ship was no match for the fleets that now controlled his empire. But that didn't matter. They didn't need brute force to win the humans with their ingenuity, and unorthodox methods had a way of turning even the simplest of tools into something effective. He had seen it firsthand during his recovery. They thought differently and acted differently, and in this situation, that difference was exactly what was needed. They struck at night, hitting a communications outpost that had been taken over by one of the alien races that had once served under him. It was a small victory, but a critical one with control of the outpost. They now had access to information about the current state of the Empire, about who held power and where. More importantly, it sent a message. The warrior king was not dead. He was coming back. Word spread quickly. His enemies reacted with shock and disbelief. They had thought him broken, too weak to ever pose a threat again. And now here he was reclaiming his empire one piece at a time, and some of the alien commanders, those who had profited from his fall, began to panic. They had taken his territories by force, but they knew they couldn't hold them against his strategic mind for long still. Others prepared for war, determined to hold on to what they had stolen, confident that the fractured remains of his forces would be no match for their armies. But they underestimated the humans. It wasn't their numbers or their weapons that made them formidable. It was their unpredictability and their refusal to give up, even when the odds were stacked against them. The humans weren't fighting for territory or power. They were fighting for something deeper, something the alien races could never understand, and that made them dangerous. With the warrior king leading the charge, they began to take back key positions one after another. Each victory, though small, added to their momentum, and as word spread of the king's return, those who had once served him began to rally to his side, not out of fear this time, but out of respect. The betrayal that had nearly killed him had not broken him. If anything, it had made him stronger. The final confrontation came sooner than expected, with the alien races realizing that their grip on the Empire was slipping. Banded together to make a last stand. They gathered their forces at one of the most strategic locations in the Empire, a fortified planet that had once been the heart of the king's military operations. It was there that they believed they could finally crush him for good, putting an end to his resurgence before it gained more ground. But the warrior king had learned from his time with the humans that he no longer relied solely on brute force and overwhelming strength. His approach was different. Now calculatedly precise, he led his forces with a clarity of purpose that he hadn't possessed before, and the humans, with their creativity and persistence, played a key role in his strategy. As the battle unfolded, it became clear that the alien races had made a critical mistake. They were fighting as they always had, focused on power, on numbers, on dominance. But the king and his human allies fought with something more. They fought with determination, with trust in each other, and with a purpose that went beyond conquest. The alien armies, despite their size, began to falter. Victory was not swift, but it was certain. The eye commanders, realizing their defeat, fled, leaving their forces in disarray, and as the dust settled on the battlefield, the warrior king stood victorious once more. His empire was not what it had been before. It was smaller, more fragile, but it was his again, and this time it was built on something far stronger than fear. In the aftermath, the humans prepared to leave. Their mission was complete, but as they stood at the edge of the battlefield, ready to return to their own world, the warrior king approached them. He owed them more than just his life. They had shown him a new way, a new understanding of what it meant to lead, to rule, and he wasn't ready to let them go. He offered them a place in his new empire, not as subjects or soldiers, but as allies, true allies, equals. They had proven their worth to him in ways no other race ever had, and he knew that with them. By his side, his empire could thrive once more. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about trust, loyalty, and the kind of strength that could only come from unity. The humans, though surprised by the offer, accepted it not because they sought power or territory, but because they had come to respect the warrior king as much as he had come to respect them together. They would rebuild what had been lost, not through dominance but through cooperation. And so the warrior king's empire was reborn not as the cold, fear-driven machine it had once been, but as something new, something stronger with the humans. By his side, he would lead not through fear, but through trust, through loyalty, and through the lessons he had learned in the darkest moments of his life.